back in December, Diane Sawyer did this ABC special interviewing all the actors from the movie Love Actually. And so with Hugh Grant, she goes, Love Actually is, he goes, dead.
So twice the amount of men in that range are single compared to the amount of women
So
there.
there's really 2 men for every 1 available
Single woman, yes. What do we mean by alone and versus lonely? Like what
described it, loneliness, as a, quote, perception that one is socially on the edge.
we go back a little bit to the quote from that guy that we agreed with.
Right.
We're all lonely. So
Right.
if that's the case, everyone's on the edge of society? Like,
Welcome to the Live Truly Free podcast, where we provide fatherly guidance to entrepreneurs at any level of their journey. Hi, I'm George Black, and this is AJ. Are you ready for this week's adventure of building great companies and discovering the Live Truly Free lifestyle for entrepreneurs? Awesome. Let's get started.
They say it's lonely at the top. I saw an article on Tim Cook from Fast Company. It was about a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting because it talked about Cook, former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz, and it was about how it is lonely. It is lonely at the top, and the article went on to give some tactics on how to combat that, but not sacrifice your personal goals or the organizational goals. I would agree, it is lonely at the top, but it's also lonely at the middle, and it's lonely at the bottom. I think it's lonely all over.
yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I actually saw a video earlier this week from Breaking Points. It's a news channel on YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
and they did like a deep dive on kind of this loneliness epidemic, if you would call it, because they found a study that said 63% of men between the ages of 18 to 29 years old are single, while at the same time, women in that same exact age range, 18 to 29 years old, only 31% of them are single. So twice the amount of men in that range are single compared to the amount of women
So
there.
there's really 2 men for every 1 available
Single woman, yes.
Did they say, well, what happened to the other women?
A lot of them have started dating outside of that age range,
Uh-huh.
just taking less interest in men of their own age.
I have an idea on that. Because I've been seeing some studies too, and listening to YouTube videos or watching YouTube videos and hearing these guys talk about this. And you'll find there's a whole, guys in their 20s are talking about this on YouTube videos. But a lot of men are addicted to video games and porn.
Yeah.
And they kind of alternate between the two, and it's nonstop.
Mm-hmm. They get lost in the virtual world because they kind of find their way out of the real physical world.
Right. And what these guys are talking about is, so they've kind of figured out ways to kind of re-engage with society.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing it like in fitness, going to gyms and working out and that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
getting their diet much better, all kinds of
Yeah,
things.
because I'm obviously in that age range, and I know a lot of guys who battle with those addictions and that loneliness. Like, for example, one of the roommates I had in college, just every day he would skip classes, he would just wake up and the room would smell like weed, and he would just be playing video games all day, and then
Wow.
I would get home at night and he was still playing video games, and he would kind of never broke his ways. And then the few times that like we'd walk in passing when he wasn't playing video games, we'd talk, and he would always like try to be coming up and try to be changing himself, but it like working out was one of his things. He was like, I went for a run today, but probably not going to do that for a while again. Like
Right.
he kind of knew no matter if he actually tried to make changes, it just wasn't going to happen. He's going to revert back.
Yeah, we want to dig into this loneliness issue because, man, I think it's epidemic
Yeah.
on some level. And we've been talking about happiness and is it tied to money? Can you be rich and be happy? All these sorts of things. But at the same time, loneliness is the other side of that. It's the flip side to that. Just the other weekend, it was a tragic situation that I was a part of where I encountered this friend who now I hope is in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
But the pain of loneliness in his life, and this is the way he described it, had so overwhelmed him, and that he was he was trying to find companionship in a bottle of vodka, or bottles, actually. Mm-hmm. And it didn't work. And I just saw the pain firsthand. It's excruciating. Yeah. It's just excruciating.
And that sounds exactly like kind of my roommate story. And it's like you see these people, and especially at least how I felt with my roommate, it's like I just felt helpless. It's like no matter what I say to you, or like I can try to keep living my life by example. Like you see me going out of the room doing stuff, and like all of this, like don't like. I could never cross that bridge to figure out, like, you could try to walk away from the pain, instead of leaning into it.
That's great, because in that situation I was in, there was another man, and he's a mentor kind of person, and his response was exactly that. There's nothing I can say right now. And we had to be very, very careful. Mm-hmm. I mean, this could have, you can go from loneliness to depression to suicide pretty quick.
Yeah.
If you're not careful. And we didn't want to trigger anything. We just kind of wanted to kind of hold things together, get through this moment so that you could get to a place to start getting help. But here's what he said. Here's what the mentor guy said. We're all lonely. And he went on with some other comments, but it was just sort of struck me as like, we are all lonely. We are all lonely. And, so there's I was thinking about this and this topic, and it's almost 60 years ago, the Beatles wrote the song Eleanor Rigby. You would have not heard this.
Yeah, not familiar.
But the opening line is, look at all the lonely people. And then they go on to describe how lonely Eleanor Rigby is. Mm-hmm. It's an incredibly depressing song. And I'm sure it was number one in the charts.
Yeah.
But so what? Let's kind of get some definitions going here, because we hear I'm all alone, I'm lonely.
What do we mean by alone and versus lonely? Like what do you think is the difference between those two?
Yeah. So you can be alone, and if I'm alone, there's no one else present. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean I have to be lonely. Lonely is sad because I don't have any friends. I don't have anyone. I don't have any company. Mm-hmm. It's a gloomy, dejected about being alone. So you can be lonely in a crowd.
Yeah. How is that possible? Is it just
because so alone is a physical thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you and I are not alone right now because we're together.
Yeah.
Unless we were doing this on Zoom, and then we would be alone but would be together. But let's not make this any more complicated than it is.
Yeah. Lonely
is an interior condition. Being alone is a physical condition. So right now you and I are together, so we are not physically alone.
Yeah.
But in a crowd, loneliness is a feeling. Mm-hmm. And it ties to something, and we'll get to that in a second. This might help. I've got to read this quote because it's really good. Loneliness researcher John, and I can't pronounce his last name very well, Chalpato, described loneliness, as a, quote, perception that one is socially on the edge. So in other words, you're on the edge of society. You perceive yourself. Mm-hmm. Now, that could be a misperception, or it could be a correct perception.
Yeah. I want to lean towards probably a misconception, right? Because if we go back a little bit to the quote from that guy that we agreed with,
right,
we're all lonely. So if that's the case, everyone's on the edge of society? Like,
well, yeah. See, I think, okay, here's what I think is at the core of loneliness. Mm-hmm. And see if this works for you guys. But I think every single one of us wants to be understood. And every single one of us doesn't feel like anyone really gets
it. Yeah, that's about it.
And that's the core to loneliness.
It's not about how many people you know or friends you have or what social circles you're in.
Right.
It's does the people around you, does society know who you are fully and kind of accept that?
Yeah. Yeah, Sorry, you just launched me into a thought here. There's a movie about Mark Zuckerberg, and how he started Facebook. The title of the movie escapes me.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all are probably screaming at me right now, the title, right? How I forget this title, I don't know. But he is a very lonely person.
Mm-hmm.
He is a person who's living on the edge of society. And so he creates this software with friends.
Mm-hmm. To bring everyone together.
Yeah, and that's why people call it fake book.
Yeah.
Because it's not real.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 1,000 friends. No, you don't.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, though. A lonely man invented the social media platform that isolated society more than ever.
And to be honest and fair, most of what I know about Zuckerberg is from that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. We'll put it in the show notes or something. But yeah. So I have a friend, and they were commenting to me that they're not lonely anymore because their spouse doesn't travel like the spouse used to travel. And I said, well, I think at the core of loneliness is that every single one of us wants to be understood, that no one really gets us.
Mm-hmm.
And this person was like, they didn't really react, but you could tell from their reaction, it was like, oh. And see, I think this person had it confused.
Mm-hmm.
I think this person was no longer alone.
But they're still lonely.
But they're still lonely.
Because the wife is around more often doesn't mean she understands you anymore.
Right, exactly. So here's the deal. I believe we are designed for relationships. I mean, you can just see it. You go to any coffee shop or restaurant, and there's all this interaction, right?
Mm-hmm. And I actually recently went to a comedy show, and at the door, they take everyone's phone and they put them in these pouches that they lock them in, so you can't go on your phone during the show. And then once you get out, they take them out of the bags for you. But I got there early, and I'm sitting around this club, and just everyone is just interacting with each other because no one can physically access their phone.
That is fascinating.
And I was just like mind blown because, I'm 22. Like, I've pretty much grown up only with phones around.
Right.
And it was just really interesting to be in a room where nobody had a phone. Like, it was kind of like being transported back in time, it felt like.
That is fascinating. So, back in December, Diane Sawyer did this ABC special interviewing all the actors from the movie Love Actually. It was the 20th anniversary since the movie had come out. And in fact, if you go back and look at our December podcast, that's our Christmas one we did on Love Actually. You'll notice it on YouTube. It's got a big red bow. So, like the cover. She interviewed Hugh Grant. And so one of the things she was doing with all the actors is she would start off with this love actually is, and they would fill in the blank, right? Mm-hmm. And so with Hugh Grant, she goes, love actually is, he goes, dead. And there's this really nervous laughter by Diane Sawyer. And he goes on to explain, well, I mean, as I don't see any romance anywhere, even in the cities, where you could guarantee to see couples snogging, which I think is showing like amorous affection, hugging, kissing. Mm-hmm. Like couples snogging in the streets of Paris, Rome. No, they're just staring at their phones, eating. And I'm like, yeah, that's what you see in most cases is people with their phones right there at the table. I love that idea of that comedy club where they've got them in bags. You can't see the phone, right? I mean,
you can't see the phone. You can't access. You can feel it vibrate, but you can't
do anything about it.
Exactly.
That's great. We're not designed to live in this kind of human isolation. Yet we're constantly living in it.
Yeah, we're not primarily designed for everybody to speak on these and like this to be your primary mode of communication, because just so much, if you're texting someone, so much of what you're thinking, what you're feeling is lost in the words because they don't see your face. It's like we've just lowered every level of communication just to the root level of words, which isn't even like our primal form of communication.
Right. We just have to send little symbols of how we're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been thinking about loneliness, not only for this topic, but just, this whole concept of, people not understanding us, not understanding me the way I would like to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
It hit me about an antidote for loneliness.
In next week's podcast, we will discuss a great antidote to loneliness. I'll give you a hint. It has nothing to do with money.
So for more conversations like this one between me and AJ, check out this video right here. I know you're going to love it. And in the meantime, may you live truly